Before I begin, I want to say that all the incidents shared here are real and collected from many people. Some events may seem small, some big, and some unusual that is completely natural. I am telling the story exactly as I collected it. I am starting with the first story. This experience dates back to 2008 somewhere in Asia, when I was just a student in the 8th grade. It is a story that every member of my family witnessed, and it begins with a mistake that should never have happened. A tenant living in our house passed away. The funeral preparations seemed normal, but a grave error was made during the funeral prayer. The body was placed in reverse, the head where the feet should have been. By the time the elders realized the mistake, the body had begun to bloat due to the heat, and out of fear or haste, they decided not to disturb it further. They buried her in that reversed state in a nearby cemetery. The unrest began that very night. Her husband went to the washroom in the middle of the night when the power suddenly cut out, plunging the house into a thick, suffocating darkness. In those few seconds of silence, a voice, identical to his late wife's, whispered directly into his ear, "Take the candle." He was found unconscious on the floor minutes later. As the days passed, the hauntings grew more violent. Terrified, the family sought the help of a spiritual healer. His verdict was grim. The soul was in agony because the body was dishonored by the reversed burial. He ordered the grave to be opened so the rites could be performed correctly. On the 8th day after her death, we gathered at the cemetery. As the men dug through the soil and removed the final planks of wood, the crowd gasped in horror. The woman was not lying down. She was leaning against the mud wall of the grave, sitting upright, most terrifyingly. A large portion of her white burial shroud was stuffed deep into her mouth, as if she had been trying to scream or chew her way out. Eventually, they sought help from a religious spiritual guide, someone known in different faiths by different names, an imam to some, a priest or monk to others, a holy man trained in dealing with the unseen, keeping his composure, descended into the grave. He recited prayers as he slowly pulled the fabric from her mouth. The moment the shroud was freed, the body suddenly went limp and slumped back into a lying position. We performed the washing and the prayer once more, burying her the right way this time. But the story doesn't end with the grave. Some time later, the husband remarried, trying to move on with his life. One night, while his new wife was away, he disappeared from the house. We found him the next morning, wandering nearly 2 kilometers away, dazed and trembling. He told us that his first wife had come for him. She didn't look like a corpse. She looked like the woman he remembered. She had lured him out of the house. But when he reached the outskirts of the woods, her face twisted in rage. She was furious that he had replaced her. He claimed she struck him across the face with a force that felt like ice-cold iron. We saw the mark, a dark, bruised handprint clearly visible on his cheek. 2 days later, the husband was found dead in his bed. No medical cause was ever found. Even now, years after we moved, the people near that old house in Kulna claim they can still hear a woman's soft, rhythmic weeping late at night. It seems that once the shroud is reversed, the soul never truly finds its way back to the light. Now, I am moving on to the next story. I've heard many scary stories from the road, but the one my friend Salman told me still makes my skin crawl. Salman owns a pickup van, and one night, he learned that the dead do not always travel quietly. It was around 10 p.m. when an urgent call came in. A family needed to take a body from the medical college in the city to a remote village. Salman's regular driver was exhausted from working all day, so Salman decided to drive the van himself. He thought the extra money would be worth the long night ahead. By 11 p.m., they were at the hospital morgue. The body was a victim of a tragic suicide and was wrapped tightly in a traditional straw mat. Before loading it, Salman and the family took a final look to make sure everything was okay. The body was complete and intact, but Salman noticed that the air around the body felt strangely heavy and cold. Salman sat in the driver's seat with a young assistant. In the back of the open pickup, 3 relatives sat on the floor, guarding the body as they began the long drive into the dark night. The journey started smoothly. They crossed the river and reached the outskirts of the next district without any trouble. But as they approached a small, nameless bridge, the feeling changed. Salman felt a sudden, heavy pressure in his chest. He kept checking his mirror, feeling sure that a car was following them very closely. But every time he looked, the road behind was just a black, empty void. Suddenly, while driving at 90 kilometers per hour, a loud, terrifying scream came from the back. "Stop! The body is gone!" Salman slammed on the brakes. He was shocked. The van had high steel railings, nearly 3 feet tall. It was impossible for a body to just fall out, while 3 men were sitting right next to it, especially since the road was smooth and there were no bumps. Shaking with fear, Salman turned the van around. They drove back slowly, their headlights cutting through the mist, until they saw the straw mat lying on the side of the road. Salman was too scared to leave his seat. He stayed inside with the doors locked, watching through the glass as the others jumped out. They lifted the body back into the van and continued the journey. Everyone was now praying out loud. But the nightmare was not over. Near a small village, the screams started again. It fell again. It happened again. Salman's heart was pounding. He pulled over, his hands shaking so much that he could barely hold the wheel. This time, the search took much longer. They finally found the mat nearly 50 yards away from where it had dropped. When they reached it, Salman finally stepped out of the van. He noticed the straw mat was ripped and shredded, as if something had been clawing at it from the inside. But as the relatives pulled the mat open to re-wrap the body, the silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. The body was there, but the head was gone. The neck was ripped and bloody. It was completely empty. They searched the road, the bushes, and the bridge for hours, but the head had simply vanished. It was there at the hospital. They had all seen it with their own eyes. Yet, somewhere on that lonely highway, the dead had left a piece of itself behind. Salman never found out how that journey ended or what the family did when they reached their home with a headless body. Even now, years later, whenever he tells this story, the hair on his arms stands up. He still refuses to drive on that road after the sun goes down. My grandfather was a saint in our village. He was a doctor who treated the poor for free, often going days without proper meals so he could provide medicine to those in need. He was so beloved that the elders were planning to name the village's main road after him. But where there is light, there is shadow. I was only in the 2nd grade when I learned that even a man of God can have enemies hidden in his own bloodline. It started with a mysterious illness. Grandfather began to scream about a burning sensation, claiming thousands of ants were biting his flesh. We searched his room, scrubbed the floors, and used camphor to repel any insects, but there was nothing there. Yet his agony was real. My father and uncles spent every penny they had taking him to specialists in India. The best doctors in the world couldn't find a single symptom. Physically, he was healthy. Spiritually, he was being devoured. Eventually, his left arm went completely limp, paralyzed as if the bone had turned to lead. Desperate, we turned to a spiritual healer, someone known for dealing with cases like this. My educated family was skeptical, but watching grandfather waste away left us with no choice. The spiritual healer, a man of simple clothes but heavy eyes. He looked at my grandfather and asked my mother for a bowl of water from the bathroom. He whispered an ancient incantation over the water and looked into the reflection. Someone close to him, he said, has stolen his hair. They have crafted a doll, bound it with his locks, and pierced it with dozens of iron needles. He pointed toward the old mango tree just outside our boundary. The doll hangs there, swinging in the wind. Every time the breeze moves the branches, your father's soul shudders. And a week ago, a crow pecked at the doll's left arm. That is why his arm is dead. My father went to the tree the next morning. Deep within the thickest branches, hidden from sight, he found it. A small, crudely made doll wrapped in grandfather's hair and riddled with needles. The spiritual healer brought the doll into the house. I was supposed to be hiding, but I watched through the crack of the door. One by one, he began to pull the needles out. And then I saw the impossible. As each needle was removed, the doll, made of cloth and hair, began to bleed. Real crimson blood seeped from the pinpricks, staining the spiritual healer hands. When he finally unraveled the hair and tore the doll apart, my grandfather, who had been unconscious and on oxygen, let out a deep, shivering breath. 12 days later, my grandfather was back on his feet. Though his left arm remained weak, he went straight back to his clinic to treat his patients. He never stopped serving the people until the day he died. I don't know if you call it science, superstition, or pure evil, but I saw the blood. I saw the needles. And I know that sometimes the things that hurt us aren't viruses or bacteria. They are the silent prayers of a jealous heart. I worked as a doctor in a remote hospital, tucked away among rolling green hills and vast tea plantations, far from any major city. It was a beautiful place, but the beauty was deceptive. By 8 or 9 p.m., the entire hospital would fall into a heavy, unnatural silence. No one, not even the staff, ventured out unless it was an absolute life or death emergency. One night, around 3:30 a.m., I was resting in my quarters after a long round of patient checks. I had just drifted into a light sleep when a sharp knock at my door startled me. It was one of the nursing sisters. "Sir, emergency," she whispered through the wood. "There's a newborn in the outpatient department. Please, come quickly." I shook off the exhaustion, splashed cold water on my face, and rushed to the ward. When I arrived, I saw a woman sitting on a bench. She was dressed in a stark white burqa, an unusual sight for that hour, and she was cradling a small bundle in her arms. Her eyes were bloodshot, a deep, terrifying crimson. I assumed she had been weeping for her child. Without a word, she stood up and placed the infant on the examination table. When I asked what was wrong, she didn't answer. She simply stared at me with those red eyes and said, "Tell me what medicine he needs. I will go to the pharmacy and get it." She left before I could even begin the exam. I was alone in the room. The windows were open, and a cold wind was blowing in from the tea gardens. I reached for the infant to check its vitals. As I pulled back the towel covering the baby's face, my blood ran cold. The skin was unnaturally white, translucent, like marble. I placed my stethoscope on its tiny chest. At first, I thought I heard a beat. Then, silence. I checked again, concentrating with everything I had. Nothing. No pulse. I pulled out my penlight and checked the pupils. They were fixed and dilated, the unmistakable sign of a death that had occurred at least an hour ago. Just as I was about to cover the body and call for help, I felt a cold, iron-like grip on my wrist. I looked down. The dead infant had opened its eyes. They were the same crimson red as the mother's. Its tiny hand was clamped around my arm with a strength that was impossible for a human child. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. Then, the infant's mouth twisted into a horrific, wide grin. It began to laugh, a dry, raspy sound that echoed off the sterile walls. I tried to scream, but my throat felt like it was filled with sand. For 5 agonizing minutes, I struggled with the entity on the table. It just stared at me, laughing, its eyes burning into mine. Just before dawn, the distant call to morning prayer drifted softly through the open window. The moment the words reached the room, the strength drained out of the infant. Its eyes rolled back, the grip loosened, and it became a limp, lifeless weight once more. I bolted out of the room, locked the door from the outside, and began screaming for the guards. When the ward master and the guards finally arrived and unlocked the door, the room was empty. There was no mother, no baby. Only the white towel remained on the table, smelling of ancient earth. I checked the gate logs. The guards swore that no woman in a white burqa, no patient, had entered the hospital all night. The sister who had knocked on my door, she wasn't even on duty that night. The next morning, I came down with a 104 degrees Fahrenheit fever that lasted for days. Eventually, a respected local spiritual figure, revered across different faiths, came to see me. He told me that the hospital was built on the site of a tragedy. Decades ago, a woman had murdered her own child there to start a new life with a second husband. She was never caught, but her spirit, and the spirit of the child, never left the grounds. I resigned that very week. I realized that as a doctor, I could heal the living, but I was powerless against the ghosts of those who were never allowed to live. In early 2011, everyone in our area was obsessed with midnight badminton matches. I was playing a game near the local market, and by the time we finished, it was well past midnight. I had already told my parents that I would be staying over at my friend Maverick's house in a small village called Merikoy. To get to Maverick's house, there were two paths, the main road or a shortcut through a thick forest. During the day, people used the forest path all the time, but at night, nobody dared to go there. But I was young and excited from the game, so I decided to take the risk and took the shortcut. I entered the forest around 12:15 a.m. Within minutes, everything felt strange. The air was heavy and still. I felt a cold chill down my spine, like someone was staring at me from the dark. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I saw it. A white cat walked out from the bushes. It was huge, at least twice the size of a normal house cat. It didn't make a sound. It just walked right next to me. Then, it started rubbing against my legs. Its fur felt ice cold against my skin. Every time I walked faster, the cat moved faster too. When I reached the edge of an old graveyard, the cat suddenly disappeared into the shadows of the graves. I hurried past the cemetery toward a large house with a big garden. Maverick's house was just on the other side. As I passed the gate, I saw something between two tall coconut trees. A swing was moving back and forth in the dark. Sitting on the swing, with her back to me, was a woman in a bright white dress. She was swinging slowly. At first, I thought she was just someone who lived there, but then I looked closer. She was very tall, maybe 6 feet or more. Her skin was a ghostly, sick pale color, as if there was no blood in her body. Her long black hair reached down to her waist. Then I noticed something terrifying. As she swung, I couldn't see any feet. Her legs weren't hanging down. It looked like she was just a weight floating on the seat. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. The swing stopped instantly. The woman turned her head slowly, like a machine. I couldn't see a nose or a mouth. All I saw were two huge, glowing eyes that burned with a strange light. I didn't wait for her to say anything. I ran as fast as I could to Maverick's house. My heart was beating out of my chest. When I got there and told him everything, he just laughed. He said it was just a trick of my mind because it was so late. The next morning, we went back to that garden. I wanted to show him the swing, but as we stood between the two coconut trees, my heart sank. There was no swing, no ropes, no seat, and no marks on the trees. Maverick's face turned pale. I knew there was no swing there. He whispered, "I've lived here all my life, but if I told you that last night, you would have died of fear." To this day, I never go near those woods after dark. I still don't know if I saw a real ghost, or if something in that forest just wanted to show me something terrible. 2008, after my high school exams, I joined a group of 19 people, mostly fellow students, for a 40-day spiritual retreat. Our journey took us to a quiet border region in Karaburan, Turkey, nestled among rolling hills and olive groves. The rules of our group were simple. We would stay in a different mosque every 3 days, dedicating our time to prayer and service. By our second stop, we reached a mosque that was still under renovation. The local imam, a religious leader in Muslim communities. Imam is the title used in Islam. In other religions, a leader might be called a priest, pastor, or elder. A venerable and deeply religious man pulled our leader aside with a grave warning. This place is a crossroads for such a restless spirit is called a jinn in Islam. A jinn is a non-human spirit. In other cultures, similar beings might be called ghosts or spirits. Tell your boys to stay together. Do not go out alone after sunset. Most of us were terrified, sticking close to the lanterns after dark. But one of us, a handsome and kind-hearted student named Salman, began to change. As we moved from mosque to mosque, Salman became distant. He stopped eating with us and spent hours in intense, silent prayer. But the strangest part was his friends. In every new village, Salman would be seen sitting in a corner of the mosque, deep in conversation with a local man. Whenever any of us tried to join them, the conversation would instantly stop. The stranger would stare at us with cold, hollow eyes until we left. None of us ever heard a single word they spoke. We later realized that these locals never spoke to anyone else in the village. They appeared only for Salman. The crisis peaked at our next stop. During a morning meeting, Salman abruptly refused his chores, claiming he had business to attend to. By noon, he was gone. He didn't return for afternoon prayers, nor for sunset. As a storm began to brew, our leaders searched the local markets in the pouring rain, but Salman had vanished. Exhausted and desperate, we gathered at 1 a.m. for a night of collective prayer. Our leader wept as he begged for Salman's safe return. Just as he closed the holy book, a thunderous thud shook the mosque. We rushed to the entrance and found Salman collapsed against the door, unconscious. Beside him lay a single bamboo staff. Outside, a torrential rain was flooding the streets, but as we pulled Salman inside, we realized something impossible. His clothes were bone dry. The bamboo staff was dry. Not a single drop of rain had touched him. A few days later, Salman walked into the mosque with a small bundle. Inside were fried snacks, stuffed with spiced beef liver. He insisted we eat them. They were the most delicious things I have ever tasted. But when we asked the villagers where he could have bought them, they looked at us in confusion. Beef liver snacks? No one makes those in this entire region, they said. The final horror came at midnight. Our leader opened the mosque door to prepare for prayer and saw Salman standing under a tree in the courtyard, his head tilted back at an impossible angle, staring at the sky. The leader looked back at Salman's bed. It was empty. The mosque doors had been locked from the inside. There was no physical way for him to be outside. When we tried to bring him back in, Salman began to scream in a voice that wasn't his. "Leave me! My people are coming for me! You must leave!" We eventually sought help from a powerful spiritual healer. He looked at Salman and turned pale. He told us that the local friends Salman had been talking to were not men at all. They were jinn who had been captivated by Salman's beauty and spirit. They were slowly luring him into their world. The healer explained that the bamboo staff we found was the weapon used by a guardian spirit to strike the dark jinn and force them to drop Salman back at the mosque during our prayers. Salman was given a protective amulet, and though he returned to us, he was never the same. We spent the remainder of our 40 days in a state of constant prayer, knowing that even in the house of God, there are guests we cannot see.